but I'm not sure if you're at your computer. If you could raise your hand, I'll send you the panelist connection information one more time. There. Okay. All right, perfect. Jess, feel free to go ahead and share your screen, and then I will turn things back over to Karen.
Our next and final presenter for session C is Jess Farrell. Her presentation is titled A Link to the Past, Enhancing Digital Object Linking in ArchivesSpace. Jess Farrell is the owner-operator of Red Start Works Archival Consultancy. She helps clients scope and deploy digital archives infrastructure, preservation plans, and manage the organizational change that follows. Jess is the consultant for the Lyrasis Community Supported Technologies Interoperability Project, where she is writing functional requirements for interoperability solutions for all Lyrasis CSTs, including ArchivesSpace. Jess, take it away.
Is my audio working now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you all for having me. Yes, as stated, my name is Jess Farrell. I run a consultancy called Red Start Works, and I am the consultant for the CST Interoperability Project, which is a project that Lyrasis is running to develop new enhancements on all 5 of their community-supported technologies. I also, in my past, was a community facilitator for communities like the ArchivesSpace community. So I'm excited to be working with community-supported technologies specifically. The goal of today's presentation is to share with you a little bit about the project and what we've done so far, although I'll try to be as quick as possible because that's kind of the boring part. And then we'll go through the user journeys for the stories that we've selected to develop functional requirements for ArchivesSpace. All of them are kind of related to linking digital objects, hence the presentation, A Link to the Past, Enhancing Digital Object Linking in ArchivesSpace. A little bit about the project is the 5 community-supported technologies. So in addition to ArchivesSpace, we're working with DSpace, Vivo, Fedora, and CollectionSpace. And all of these technologies I'm developing functional requirements for. So that's kind of the bigger picture. The project is focused on enhancing interoperability for the technologies, focusing on community-supported functional requirements and sustainability so that these enhancements can be sustained by the community of developers and community developers as well moving forward. And then we're focused on open source software and protocols. Closed source applications were not totally off the table, but as you'll see in my presentation today, we've stuck with all open source software and protocols as we move forward. And it's important to note that the phase of the project that I'm working on right now, which started in October of 2025 and goes until June of this year, is only to develop the functional requirements. Development will be completed over a period of time following the functional requirements writing. So just keep in mind today that I'm not talking about development that is actually happening like tomorrow. We are taking a while to really do all of the analysis required to make sure that we understand the user experience needed for the right requirements. So far we've had some workshops and I sent out a survey to all 5 community-supported technologies. Thank you all for filling out that survey if you were able to. We got some great feedback that I'll go through today. And if you want to hear more about the project, you can go to the website. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and share all the links that I was going to share today because I will have a lot of questions for you. So I have a document where a Google Doc, this 3rd link here, where as I'm going through these user stories, feel free to drop in some notes there. I didn't want to clog up the chat and the Q&A too much here. But you can also ask questions in the chat too, of course. There's also a link here to comment on proposed functionality in GitHub. So all of the information that I'm sharing with you today is up on GitHub as well. And that is a great place for you to comment, share the link with your colleagues if they might have comments. And I will be taking that information into consideration and further developing the user scenarios and functional requirements based on your comments. Okay, so I wanted to share a little bit about the feedback that I got last year and the workshops and the surveys and kind of how we came to these decisions as a bit of background. Let me find my notes. I don't have them right. Okay, so the survey goal was to understand integrations in use and desired integrations. We're thinking about integrating applications, but the project is really more broadly about develop or implementing open protocols and solutions that would be more specific than just one application. So we asked a lot about integrations and specific applications in the survey. And then at the workshops, we also got additional information about integrations that people would like to see or what the interoperability solutions could really look like, which is a little bit harder to ask in a survey. So here's what we got from the survey. 84%, this is just for the ArchivesSpace survey, by the way. There were 5 surveys. I did some aggregated data that I'll talk about later, but right now I'm just talking about the ArchivesSpace respondents. 84% of respondents identified as staff users, so that is mostly who was filling out the survey. We also had quite a few administrators and communicators and developers. Of the respondents who reported using other Lyrasis community-supported technologies in addition to ArchivesSpace, 64% used DSpace, 24% used Fedora, and 12% were using CollectionSpace. We wanted to know about this because it's very appealing to think about integrating ArchivesSpace with another community-supported technology at Lyrasis, understanding that these are all open source technologies. Many institutions are using more than one, and sometimes people expect integrations to kind of already exist between Lyrasis technologies. So that's a reason that we were interested in exploring that. Respondents also cited a lot of integrations with ArchivesSpace that have already been built at their organizations. I know there's many more integrations in use than just what came through the survey, but the survey showed 25 integrations in use that people talked about. The most commonly integrated application was Alma or Primo, followed by Aeon, ArcLight, and ArchiveIt. You may not find these results very surprising. I certainly didn't, but it was very good to have the data there to really show what we kind of hear about in the community a lot. And I'm sorry I forgot to mention this earlier. There were 55 respondents to the survey, so that gives you an idea of how much of the community is represented here. When asked to choose their top user needs, respondents' top choices were linking digital objects in my institution's digital asset management or digital preservation system to digital object records and ArchivesSpace. 84% of folks cited that as their top need. Reducing need to duplicate metadata between different systems was the second most popular user need. And exchanging ArchivesSpace data with my institution's library catalog was the third most popular need. And you can see the other user needs that we pulled on here. I just shared those top 3 because they were kind of the ones that we focused on for selecting the interoperability solutions. Of the respondents who did express interest in cross-community supported technology integrations, DSpace was the most desired application to integrate with, followed by Fedora. And I would just add to this that 35% of respondents said that they had no need to integrate ArchivesSpace with another Lyrasis community-supported technology. So this is just a subset of the folks who did say that they would be interested. And then we know that ArchivesSpace users have already built lots of integrations, like I just mentioned. And so unsurprisingly, there was also a lot of interest in lots of integrations with applications outside of the Lyrasis Organizational Home. We probably had, I don't know what the final count was. There were dozens of applications that people put in this survey that they would really like to see. But the most popular applications mentioned were ArchiveIt. 47% of respondents were interested in an ArchiveIt integration. Islandora with 27% of respondents, Archivematica at 22% of respondents, and Omeka at 15%. So That kind of concludes the survey review and what we heard from the survey. The workshop data was captured before the survey was done, and mostly reflected the same kind of information that the survey responses showed. Like I said, it also provided a space to give some more like additional qualitative information about interoperability solutions that weren't in the survey. And one of these I just want to mention because it was we decided that it was out of scope for this project, but I will certainly be recommending in my final report that we continue to consider an integration like this. But one idea was to have an integration platform as a service, or iPaaS, for ArchivesSpace, or maybe even all of the Lyrasis community supported technologies. So this would be like GUI user interface where you could more easily choose, like, connect this to that, and some drop downs, and be able to create automation, sort of like the best example for me is like Airtable, where you can create the automations in Airtable, and it's a very easy, just click and select what you want to do. So that was a really cool idea that will not fit into the scope of this project, but we got a lot of really neat ideas like that through the feedback. And so that was a great activity. Okay, so the user stories that we did select are here on the screen. Our goal was to select about just one solution to write for each community supported technology. And we went a little bit further for ArchivesSpace. There were just so many needs and so many possible paths forward in a really engaged community here. So in the end, we chose 4 user stories to write requirements for. And I will go ahead and read them out and then say a little bit more about why we chose these use cases. So I said 4, but I've conflated these down to 2 because there's a separate user story for dealing with a single object or multiple objects. And I really wanted to write specifications for bulk actions, if possible, in this project. So the first is linking and depositing objects. As an ArchivesSpace user, I want to deposit a file or folder of files into an institutional repository, digital library, or preservation system that is ostensibly open, has an API that could be linked to ASpace, and link it to a new ArchivesSpace digital object record, or do this in bulk. The second user story is linking digital objects specifically to DSpace. So as an ArchivesSpace user, when I'm editing a component in ArchivesSpace, I want to search for an item or collection of related items in DSpace and add their links to the corresponding ArchivesSpace digital object record. So we chose these because they incorporate 2 of the 3 top user needs from the survey: linking digital objects and reducing metadata duplication between 2 systems. 2 of these incorporate DSpace, so it's an integration with the Lyrasis CST, which was appealing. Connecting ArchivesSpace to DSpace will provide a sort of proof of concept for an enhanced digital object linker. And DSpace was the 5th most popular application to integrate with in the survey, especially when we aggregated all the data together from the workshops and the survey. And I will also say that there was data coming from the DSpace side as well. There were many DSpace users who wanted to integrate with ArchivesSpace too. And then I'll also just mention that 2 of these also, the linking and depositing story provides an opportunity to incorporate an open depositing protocol, SWORD, into the ArchivesSpace API, and SWORD is supported by DSpace as well. So ostensibly, if we develop requirements for this linking and depositing objects enhancement, you could also deposit objects to DSpace using it. That's the idea anyway. It's all vaporware right now, right? I just wanted to mention a couple of other user stories first, before we go into the journeys dig in more deeply into what I just shared. There's user stories involving ArchivesSpace coming from other Lyrasis community supported technologies. CollectionSpace is the main one. So CollectionSpace has a couple of user stories here for, as an administrator, wanting to offer a single search interface on a discovery layer for data from both ArchivesSpace and CollectionSpace. And then as a user, being able to search that shared discovery platform and bring up the relevant records that you would expect to bring up. And we're looking at using Blacklight or ArcLight Solar with that. And then there's another project here to develop functional requirements for an integration repository. So this would involve all 5 of the community supported technologies. And for your case in ArchivesSpace, the case would be as an archivist at an institution interested in adopting ArchivesSpace or maybe creating a new integration with ArchivesSpace. I would like to know, how ArchivesSpace has already been integrated with local systems that are similar to mine, if it's not already built into the system. Okay, so let's go back to those brief 2-sentence user stories that I just shared. And I just wanted to share how I'm thinking about these user journeys a little bit. I really want to hear from you today if this seems right, if this seems like how your user journey would go, if you were going to use an enhancement like this. So the first one is to deposit, or not, sorry, not deposit. The first one is to link a digital object from DSpace without having to manually go to DSpace, copy and paste that link back into ArchivesSpace. So we have here going into create a digital object, where I've suggested that we could have a new button here for add a DSpace file under file versions potentially. At this point, I'm trying to fit in anywhere I can, but I'm happy to hear, any other ideas. From there, you would get an option that is the similar to the existing way to link digital objects to archival components. If you are using the instances kind of digital object searcher there. So there would be a link searcher like this and file versions that you would have, your administrator would have configured that you could access a certain DSpace repository, and this link searcher would search that DSpace repository for your keywords. You would then select the digital object, and it would, after saving and closing the object, then you would be able to see the digital object in ArchivesSpace, and then in DSpace, the ArchivesSpace digital object would also be added. So again, that would require some more configuration on the DSpace side to accept the data that is being sent from ArchivesSpace. But that is the idea there. I have a few questions about this that I would, like I said, I put this document here, the Google Doc, in my comment. And it has all of these questions there. So if you'd like to respond there, that's great. I'd love to hear from you actually in this session too. But some things that I'm thinking about as I'm working through this is, how do folks really currently link a single digital object? Which I know is a really basic question, but I just want to make sure that we are designing for the most common use cases. So I'm curious if you create the digital object entirely outside of archival components, or if you add a digital object instance of an archival component, or if you have another workflow entirely. Oh, you know what? Thank you so much, Bridget. Sorry, I just got distracted by the chat. I sent my documents to the hosts and panelists. Thanks, Katie. You're awesome. Okay. Another workflow, if you have a totally other workflow for linking a single digital object, or I do not need to link a single digital object, is another option there. And then just other information or functionality that you would want to add, like where would this configuration go is kind of a question that I have and need to work more on, for example. But any other big things like that you would like to mention, and then just any other feedback is great. So for doing this with this linking process with multiple items, I did suggest going into a component that has subcomponents already that are digital objects, I guess that would need to be. And then under instances, adding a digital collection, a new button where you could add a digital collection. This would, again, have a linker field similar to the one that exists, only you would be able to search for a collection. I am very curious to hear from folks how you would imagine matching up metadata between these two systems. I imagine you don't want to have to find the DSpace URI and copy that in, although that might be the cleanest and best way to get the right link. So would you want to search the component title, the collection title, the URI, or would you like for that to be configurable on, you know, your ASpace level so that you can choose which field in DSpace that bar would search? So those are some questions I have there. Another question I have is, with dealing with bulk items like this, should there be a user review or approval step here? I don't know if there's an interface for that already exists. So I wanted to just bring that up. It would be terrible to accidentally link thousands of digital objects that were incorrect and then have to go back and undo that. So I'm thinking about what user review or approval steps might be needed. And there's probably a lot more questions to ask about this, but yes, how do you currently add multiple digital object links? Do you have a CSV upload? Do you use the API in a homegrown kind of way, or is there some other way? And then what metadata would be most useful to match between ArchivesSpace and DSpace to bring in a whole collection of digital objects? And would you want to use a review step? So please, if you have comments on that, I'd love to hear. Okay, moving on, moving very quickly because I hope I'm going to have enough time to hear a lot from you guys and talk. But the staff user journey for deposits, this one is just for single items. And so we're looking here at starting with an archival object, again, going into instances and creating a digital object there. And then there would be a new field group proposed for deposits. That's where the user journey would start. In this new field group, I've shown here in the middle, like what it maybe could kind of look like. This is super drafty, but it's just an example. So you would have a button here to deposit files. That's how the field group would open. And then you would need to put in a source for your file URL, all the way to the file name, and then a destination, of course. Which I have a lot of questions about. I was thinking this could be something that's viewable, as the staff user would probably want to know that they are actually depositing the object where they intend to deposit it. But that it probably would be set by the administrator on the resource or repository level, which repository you can actually connect to. I haven't gotten a chance actually to talk to Themos and other like developers yet about this, so I'm sure that I'm going to get a lot more information about the possibilities here when I actually have a chance to do that, and maybe some more guidance on like where this configuration should happen. But I'd love to hear from you guys too, what you would like to see here. Also, if you would like it to be a URI or like a natural language name, like preservation repository, access repository. Those are bad names, but you get what I mean. Hopefully. You would choose a metadata source, which could be the metadata from the archival component that you are adding an instance to. It could be metadata from a related digital object that that component is connected to, or it could be, hopefully, a separate file. My question there is like, what data format should that file be in? Of course, Bagot is the first thing that comes to mind for me, but thinking maybe more generally than that, I would love to hear what folks think. This would use the SWORD protocol, which is a deposit, an open deposit protocol, to do these deposits. So any other repository that accepts data using that protocol would be able to accept the deposit. DSpace is one of those repositories. I also am hoping that, I don't know if I should have had IIIF on this slide. That might actually just be for the next slide. But I used just the same screenshot here to show the links in the two different systems. Questions I have about this single deposit workflow is, would you like to deposit files at the same time you create digital objects or through your ArchivesSpace workflow? Probably a question that seems very basic, but I just want to take the temperature on that. Would you also want to do it with just a single object? This is another question I have for archivists. As a former archivist, I rarely ever dealt with single objects at all. I always dealt in the bulk. So I'm really just curious to hear from you. Do you create digital objects using instances or a different method, which I believe I already asked earlier. So please give me all your feedback on that one. This last one, I really have not written that much about the bulk item deposit story. So this is a huge draft. I really just copied the single version for now and added a couple of things here. So the use case that I've been looking at to sort of model, sorry about that. The use case that I've been looking at to model this bulk deposit off of uses the Cantaloupe server. It's a open source server for IIIF images. So I threw that in there as a potential proof of concept or use case that we can look at. Again, using Sword to deposit. And I would like for, in the end, since it's Sword, it could be deposited to DSpace, but I think it would be great to have an example where you can just deposit straight or just use IIIF to just present the files as well. So those are the workflows that I'm looking at and the functionalities I'm looking at. I would love to hear any more about that bulk upload as well. I know some folks have some solutions in place. If you would like to help edit the stories and functionalities, they're on GitHub issues and documents that have way more text and way more detail than what I just showed on these slides. So you can really read through them and really kind of understand more about how we're defining these things. Please comment directly on GitHub and the GitHub comments to provide feedback, and I'll have a conversation with you and incorporate your feedback. If you'd like to respond directly to today's questions that I asked, please go to the Google Doc there and put some things in the chat in the chart, and let me know if you can't access that for some reason. Just some other next steps are April, let's see, I'm meeting with the program team, UAC and TAC members in the next few weeks. So that's where we will really dig into continuing this iteration and for better defining the requirements. And then in May, I'm planning to share a full specifications document for review. And that's about all that I have for you today. So here is my email address, and I would love to discuss some of these questions and hear your feedback and whatever you have about these user stories today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jess. Yeah, feel free, if anyone would like to pop anything into the Q&A, please do that, or respond directly to the Google Doc that was shared. Bridget, you raised your hand, so I went ahead and moved you over into panelists. I didn't know if there was something that you wanted to add. That's why I did that.
No, I did not intend to raise my hand. Sorry. I mean, that said, if people have questions about the interoperability project generally, I'm happy to answer them since I'm here.
I know this may be, these questions may be things that people want to sit with before they respond to. So Jess, I do appreciate you sharing that Google Doc, because that will give people that mechanism outside of this presentation. So I don't want people to sit around any longer than they have to, but I also want to make sure we have plenty of time to discuss this now, because I do know that these are things that people care about and want very badly. So I know that there are opinions and there is a desire for this. So I want to make sure people have the opportunity. I'm seeing in the chat, if someone could share that Google Doc again in the group chat. And of course, we'll make sure that and all those links that Jess shared are posted with the recording of this when that becomes available on the event wiki. So Elizabeth asks, how would you prefer to receive feedback? Do you want us to just type in the Google Doc and put comments on each of the GitHub stories? Is that what you're asking us to do?
Well, yeah, I'm sorry that I proposed two different ways. I would prefer for you to comment on the GitHub issues. That's the best way.
that sounds good. But if GitHub is an issue for you, or you don't have an account, or for whatever reason you don't want to use GitHub, the Google Doc is a great alternative.
Exactly. Yeah. I will be checking both spaces. GitHub issues is the best place for it all to be in one space for sure.
Okay, not seeing.
Does anybody have any thoughts on things that they would like to see be configurable about these enhancements rather than like hard coded into the functionality? All right, I'm good, Jess. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
everybody for dealing with the silence there, and I hope
No.
we all got a little break to think.
Yeah. It's hard to know how much awkward silence is enough awkward silence. Yeah, thank you so much for that. But yeah, there are plenty of feedback mechanisms for this. And like you said in the beginning, this is the start of a long-term project. This is not the only opportunity to provide feedback, and this is not the only way to provide feedback ultimately. So I'm excited to see what these specifications look like at the conclusion of June. Yeah, this is exciting. This is really good news, and it's wonderful that Lyrasis is facilitating this. But we will go ahead and wrap up because all that vamping, no other questions came in the Q&A, so we're going to go ahead and call it. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us through session C of the ArchivesSpace Virtual Member Forum. We're going to go ahead and wrap up, and we will come back together in a little less than 2 hours for the final session of the forum. Thank you, everyone, and see you soon.